What up, roomies? Throughout history, we've watched great civilizations rise and eventually fall. The Romans, the Egyptians, the Maya. Everyone believed that they would last forever. But today's guest took one of the oldest questions in human history: how does civilization collapse? And transformed it into an epic fantasy trilogy. Peter Gribble, the author of The City of Magicians, a philosophical fantasy series that explores what happens when intelligent, peaceful, morally, oh yeah, excuse me,
Okay.
what happens when when intelligence, peace, morality, and comfort collide with power, fear, and change. His work blends political strategy, history, psychology, and fantasy into a story that asks questions that surprisingly feel relevant today. Today, we're diving into civilization, storytelling, magic, leadership, history, and what fiction can teach us about the real world. Welcome to In the House, Peter Gribble. What's going on, Peter?
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ariel.
I love the fact that you're on, and I love how your trilogy compares so much to like how the real world is, and the rise and falls of civilizations and all that good stuff.
I,
So
I also
before,
I, I also I also tried to make it very different so that
yeah,
it's safe. You can explore everything because it's not the world we live in, but there's so
yeah,
many parallels that you can explore everything without saying you're this, you're that, whatever. But, but
I get that. But before we dive into City of Magicians, who was Peter before the trilogy?
um, I've loved writing ever since I was in high school. And I like to paint, draw. I play jazz piano a little bit, not
Yeah,
very well, but um, what else is there? I like to garden. I've written garden columns for about 11 years for various
yeah,
periodicals here on the West Coast. And I studied psychology at University of Toronto and education at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. Um, I worked in bookstores for 30 years from Montreal, Toronto to Vancouver here in Canada. And in the end, my partner and I, we actually ran a bookstore for 10 years in a small
nice.
community called New West. And it was secondhand bookstore. We had about 60,000 titles. And upstairs was mostly fiction. Downstairs was mostly nonfiction. I was in the basement. But we also had sci-fi, true crime, and all the science and languages, poetry in the basement. So, and upstairs, mysteries, classics, fiction, Canadiana. Yeah,
That's so dope. And like,
yeah.
what's like your favorite genre to like read when you're on your leisure time?
Oh, I'm not sure. Working on the trilogy, my leisure time is basically geared towards um, the writing
Yeah,
and City of the Magicians, and basically casual research, and even things that are on the outskirts. There's part of me that is still looking for. Oh, that's an interesting word. That's an interesting setup. Wow, what a plot arc. Um, but I have to say, I did recently read Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed, and what was the other one? Conclave. Um,
nice.
but both are amazing story arcs. I was quite amazed at how strong Rachel Reed was writing the erotic side of Heated Rivalry. It's sort of shocking
Yeah,
to me. I don't usually read pornography, but I thought she did it really well. And it was more about the emotional growth of her characters. And the same thing with Conclave, that talks about this guy who's helping running Vatican City, and yet he's trying to balance off the various factions. I love the political underpinnings of that. And basically, he's trying to swirl this, and oh, there's a scandal here, and this person's not appropriate, but I have to keep my mouth shut. But oh, it's strange how things are sort of evolving towards, am I going to be the next pope? Wow. And so his spiritual arrogance just gets a little big, and then boom, ah, the surprise
humble,
ending is so amazing. Yep,
nice.
Conclave, in which they made a pretty passable movie out of it. So yeah.
That's so dope. So, Peter, at what point did you say that writing is something that you had to do in life?
Oh yeah. I thank goodness none of it has survived. all the stuff that you write when you're a kid, poetry that you write quietly, secretly, privately. And then it was grade 9 when, the first day of grade 9, we had English classes every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday,
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday. And Mrs. King, wherever she is, she eventually became Mrs. Aboud. She married an Egyptian, I think from the Egyptian consulate. Um,
Yeah.
but she announced that Monday would be composition. And I thought, oh, wow,
Yeah.
she's just given me permission to write. And I thought that was a revelation for me, that it was, she legitimized my desire
Yeah.
to write. And yeah, and I usually did pretty well on Mondays.
That's so dope. And
Yeah.
how important it was it for you, right? As you being in the ninth grade, for Mrs. King to give you that permission to like explore your creativity in your writing.
Oh, it was really important. People knew I like to draw and paint and that sort of stuff, but writing, which was still sort of secret and private, boom, I turned the corner.
I
It
feel you,
just,
man.
yeah,
I feel you, bro. So I did a little research on you, and I know that you spent 26 years writing the trilogy, correct?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So how did you stay committed to one world for so long?
There were several reasons. One was, the basic premise was, what does a pacifist, nonviolent culture do to prepare for a barbarian invasion coming in 6 months? Um,
Yeah.
I was 9 years old. I was very fortunate. I lived in France for three and a half years, when I was 8 to 12 years old, and we lived south of Paris in a place called Fontainebleau. It was for diplomatic corps, NATO kids, that sort of thing, and we all attended um, an international French school. So we had to
Yeah.
speak French in the mornings, and then in the afternoon we all separated to our various portables. And but my mom said on the first day, there was a war, Germany lost, you do not talk about it. So,
Yeah.
okay, it was basically a schoolyard courtesy. And so I knew nothing about the war. But in the second summer, the nice thing about Europe is you can get in a car and drive through 5 countries if you like.
Yeah.
So that second summer, my parents clearly lost people during World War II, but again, it was never discussed. And so I saw this amazing, in Normandy, there's this amazing, huge war memorial site. You
Yeah.
see bombed out craters, unexploded shells, the bunkers where the German soldiers were waiting for D-Day, and you go along the beaches where the invasion happened in the end. And then the thing that absolutely silenced me, tens of thousands of little white crosses going to the horizon. The
Yeah.
waste of all this commemorated death just shot me to the core.
Yeah.
And and that never left me. I was changed that day. I knew that war was a horrendous waste. And and so when we came back to North America, I began reading up on the nonviolence approach by Mahatma Gandhi, and also very definitely Martin Luther King, Testament of Hope, his collected essays and speeches, amazing reading. Um, but pacifism has also evolved since that period of time. There's a new thing, a relatively new thing called the 3.5% rule or law. And it talks about if 3.5% of the population turn out in a nonviolent protest, there's a
Yeah.
70% chance that that regime will fall. And so, wow, okay. And a really good example of that is in 1989, and it's called the Velvet Revolution that happened in Czechoslovakia. It was years in the making, but that
Yeah.
final 10 days, I think it was 10 days in October, November of 89, the population came out. And
Yeah.
in the end, the government resigned, and that was it. Communism is dead. Boom, end of story. So, but the interesting thing is, it doesn't always work. The very brutalistic, tyrannical regimes are also very aware of the 3.5 rule, and so, which is what happened in Iran in January 26. Um, the internet was closed, the phone lines went down, and they massacred something they think about 30,000 people who had protested. So just so these things have been a motivating factor for me to write about, how does this succeed? So the opening premise is that yeah, the council has figured out a couple of things, that they've chosen the wrong person to educate the barbarian, and they find this young guy called Sass. He's the main protagonist, and he's flabbergasted. Oh my God, me? No, wrong. But he has no choice.
Yeah.
The second thing they've discovered, that there's an underground movement plotting to collaborate with the same barbarian when he arrives. I mean, that's
Mm.
chapter one. That's chapter one. So yeah. But the other reason I wrote it too over that lengthy period of time was my partner. He and I were together for 43 years, and
Yeah.
we had these wonderful long discussions every night. But the one subject he did not like to discuss was religion and spirituality. He went into a fury over it. I thought, what is this coming from? Well, it turned out, I learned this within the first week we got together. Um, he had his best friend when he was about 9, 10, or 11, something like that. Um, and he became very ill, and he was going to, the doctor said, okay, he needs treatment. And his parents refused for religious reasons. And it was shocking. And he
Yeah.
saw his friend turn into a vegetable because of the denial of treatment. And he conceived this tremendous fury and hatred of all things spiritual religion. So in the City of the Magician, so it's a subject I could not discuss with him over this
Yeah.
43-year period. Um, so in the end, to make a long story short, he ended up having a quintuple bypass and then a stroke and diabetes. And I was the principal caregiver, the only caregiver. And but I thought of writing a chapter and showing him the chapters. He loves reading. So bit by bit, there's a spiritual theme that runs through City of the Magicians that increases. And it was my sneaky way of playing Scheherazade. If
Yeah.
you know the story about 1,001 Nights, she has to tell a story every day to stay alive by dawn. My situation wasn't so dire, but bit by bit, he came around. Um, and so yeah, so that's one of the that's one of the other underlying reasons for City of the Magicians.
That's so dope that I know it wasn't I know it's hard when you're trying to discuss things with your partner,
Yeah,
and there's certain traumatic events in their life that kind of prevents them from talking about it. But
right.
but on the other hand, it's dope that because of your work and through City of Magicians, you guys were eventually able to turn that around and
Yeah.
maybe open up the doors to discussion and the bouncing of ideas off of one another on that particular subject.
Yeah, but it also part of it because he was going into a 10-year long, it was all actually 12-year long decline. He
Yeah,
had been a smoker and a drinker and stuff, and it caught up with him.
yeah,
Um, and so basically, I was preparing him also for the end. And
yeah.
so he passed peacefully. Um, the timing was amazing. He died on March 6th, 2020, 2 days before the world shut down. And I thought, oh, good on you! My goodness, you jumped ship before it hits before it hits the iceberg.
Yup, he left
So
before shit hit the fan.
yeah, yeah. So he's there on the mantelpiece in his urn. I pat him on the head every once in a while, say, "How you doing?
Yeah,
I'll be joining you at some point." So yeah,
but hopefully, no time soon you'll be joining him because
thank you.
a great mind like yours is needed in today's society. Because
Oh,
I'm gonna
thank
be
you.
honest, I'm gonna be honest with you. 2019 was the last year that felt normal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this
Yeah,
is one of the things that happens in City of the Magicians. When this transition become rupture, how
yeah,
can where can you possibly go back? Going back is not really possible, but what can you bring with you to sustain you and perhaps enhance the fact that you're now in a new phase of things? And that's one of the things that happens in City of the Magicians. So, book one, Threat, that's what Threat looks like.
uh,
Um,
yeah,
and basically, it's all the plans that some of them are going sideways and some of them are in the midst of collapsing. And one of the characters, Sean, who is head of the city council, is trying to expose this underground movement so that he can put it to bed. It's tricky, it's elusive, evasive, and is it there? And in the end, he's struggling to find methods to track them. But then, book two,
okay,
within. the barbarian arrives, and he's smart. He's politically savvy. He knows that
Okay.
there are two factions. One's going after his heart. The other one is going after his ambitions. So he basically says, clear the decks. This is what I want. So everyone's like, okay, how do we adapt? So this is again where transition goes into rupture. But even rupture has its stages. And if you can sort of put the brakes on or perhaps deflect it or prepare for it. Um, I
I
have
get you on
a
that.
I have a cute little analogy. Like, if you see Humpty Dumpty is about to fall off the wall, what do you go do? You try to brace him, or you provide pillows for the fall, or you get scotch tape and twine and stuff, or
Yeah.
you learn how to make an omelet. So,
True.
yeah.
True.
So,
That's absolutely true. And sometimes it's better to learn how to make that omelet than to, prevent the fall at all.
yeah, yeah. So, but be prepared for all scenarios.
So when does a fictional world stop feeling fiction and it starts feeling real?
Oh, right away. Um, There's an interesting thing when it starts with the writing process and what
Yeah.
not just what motivates you to write, but also what is the aid to writing. It reminds me very much of Ursula K. Le Guin, that in her famous Earthsea series, fantasy, and the stories did not come to her until she started drawing the maps of Earthsea. And so with each island that she drew, she go, okay, someone is coming from here. This one specializes in this, that, the other.
Yeah.
So I made sure I drew a map of cities so that,
Oh, that looks dope. Okay.
yeah. So, but that was basically so I did not get lost. So when Sass leaves in the morning, he turns left, goes down here, and blah, blah, blah. Um, Reminds me of a story about Lawrence Guff, who is a mystery writer in Vancouver. And he had his detective inspector based in Vancouver, and he was writing on. He did pretty well. It was translated into about 18 languages, his series.
Yeah.
Um, but at one point, he has one of the books. He has his detective inspector going down the street in the West End, which is a neighborhood in Vancouver, and he got a letter. This is during the 90s when the internet didn't exist. He got a letter from the Outer
Yeah.
Hebridean Islands in Scotland. And the man said, oh, wait a second. You've got this man going down the wrong way. This is a one-way street. I said, oh my goodness. And he was right. So,
Yeah.
so, so he had to be really careful. So that's why I've got the maps. Each book has a map that's slightly different. It's still a City of the Magicians. This is book
Yeah.
3, Quickening.
Quickening.
Um, but going back to what instigates world building, like J.R.R. Tolkien for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, it didn't start until he started playing with inventing the Elvish language. And then the Elvish language developed into the history, the prehistory to Lord of the Rings. So you have the Silmarillion, which eventually got published after J.R.R. Tolkien died. Um, so, so language and maps. So I've done both. I can show you. For me, it was also writing because I have a writing system for
Oh, snap.
yeah,
That's dope.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
That's so
this is
dope.
yeah. So,
Okay.
but it's based on. I love languages. I think languages are absolutely fascinating. So I've studied Chinese and Mayan and ancient Egyptian and all that sort of stuff. But the interesting thing is Chinese, ancient Egyptian, and Mayan, the older they get, the more they start using the same shortcuts. So
Yeah.
um, this is this is one of my major resources when I think, how would
Yeah.
the Chinese write this? But then there's also stuff like, you know, wonderful, wonderful books if you want the. There are
Okay.
mistakes in this one, by the way, but this is a major classic. Volumes 1 and Volume 2 of the Egyptian Hieroglyphic Dictionary. And then there's also, um,
Okay.
so but the interesting thing is they start using very similar shortcuts, even though these cultures are enormous distances in time and culture and continents, and yet they use the same um, so there are shortcuts. So City of Magicians does the same thing. So this was a ton of fun for me. And as the language developed, so did the plot arc, which is really
Okay.
interesting. Yeah. So if you build your world, the story will come. So if they build it, they will come. So it was a ton. It's a ton. It still is. I'm still developing things. Uh,
That's
yeah,
that's so dope because that's actually a great tip for people who are actually writing, their own series and their own fiction because and this is coming from somebody who doesn't do a lot of writing, but I am writing my own little thing on the
good stuff.
side. That
Good
that's
stuff.
a great tip.
Wonderful, and it's so much fun.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
that's so
So
dope.
yes. So but the other thing is reading history. That old thing about truth is stranger than fiction. In which
Yeah.
case, okay, then go the truth. So one of the things I did, if I got a book here, um, if you can see the three books there, and there, these are the three editions of court memoirs and secret diaries, mostly from the courts of Europe, but there are some from elsewhere. And what do I know about a royal court? Wow, these will tell you that the
Yeah.
factions, the slights, the insights, the conspiracies, and the little cliques and this, that, the other. So here is one. I don't know if you can see this. This
All
is a
right.
1910 edition of Memoirs of the Courts of Europe. Um, and this guy was really interesting. He's called the Comte de Saint-Simon, or the Count of Saint Simon. That's what it looks like. Um,
Okay.
and people knew at court that he was writing, but they didn't know what he was writing. And years later, when it got published, they were horrified. All the scandals, all the petty nonsense that was going on, he was writing it down every day. Every day, once he left the court, he wrote everything down and turned it into this amazing memoir. Um, 3 volumes, also a
Wow.
trilogy. Yeah. So yeah, so it's stuff like that that absolutely fascinates me and gives me more push into terms of how people react um, and it sort of gets us safely away from our era, so I can talk about this. And the parallels are pretty amazing.
That's amazing. Cause it's like
Yeah,
I it's like you're taking inspiration from, history. One, history is fascinating, number one,
yeah,
right? Because we think that the whitewash version that we're educated with is, it is factual, but once you get into like the details, especially with like
oh
courts
yeah,
and like secret diaries, and when you
yeah,
start finding these documents that like detail certain events, you kind of see like, people are still people,
yeah,
and we're just, people are just covering the base. I don't want to say the base, but the overarching events versus the
right.
details. And this person did this to this person, and the scandal that connected this to that, and which led to these events that we're now studying.
Oh yeah, and they are underpinnings of some of the larger events. All these small
Yeah,
little things that have an effect on the larger movement of stuff, and you realize, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have done it this way as opposed to that way. Um, and
yeah,
so this is one of the patterns in City of the Magicians, that there is sort of a sweep, even though it only covers maybe 2.5 years in time as we
yeah,
measure it, and but there also the other thing that's happening is that poor Sass, who has to be educated to one of the underpinnings of it is their concept of magic. Magic is
yeah,
not wand waving and stuff like that. It's basically the magic that you and I experience on a daily basis, but
yeah,
we walk through life asleep. But every once in a
yeah,
while, if you walk down the street and there's an odd prompting, oh, I'm going to cross the street, turn left here. This is one of my usual examples. Turn left, walk down the street, and say, oh my God, I haven't seen you in 10 years, and we got to get together for coffee. And the thing is, that was an instance of what you might call magic. But what we don't do is trace back the breadcrumbs to where did that premise come? Where did that impulse come? That instinct? I'm crossing the street, turning left, and boom. There's part of us that knows that there's a part of us that is aware of what I like to call the sentience of reality. We live in
Oh,
this medium of awareness. We are basically, we need to wake up just a little bit more. Um, if we do, the things that seem to be universal and say this, that the repetitions that happen about scandals and battles and wars and losses, um, oh yeah, once more around the block, collect your $200, pass, go. Enough, enough, enough. If we want to live a more civilized, equitable, happier, creative, inspirational culture,
yeah,
we have to, one of the basic premises that we live in this conscious medium and it is evolving and we are part of this evolution into consciousness. And I love the fact that the whole notion of consciousness and sentience is now beginning to trickle through.
yeah.
Even science is beginning the hard problem of consciousness. They're beginning to study this more. And um, who is that? I'm not going to remember the name. He's a professor in the States, and he came up with this really interesting theory um, that the elements have been evolving. And so you start with and hydrogen in the beginning of the universe, and how did hydrogen evolve to us?
Yeah.
And so that there is something going on here that is huge, momentous, vast, and glorious. And if we
Yeah.
pay attention to the small little things, one of the things I like about gardening is that gardening will make you look at things more closely. And I like making little moss gardens, and they're like miniature little forests. When you take a look at this and the intricacy and the beauty and the magnificence of this, and it's a mystery. But there's consciousness, there's sentience there. Anyway, so
Yeah.
the City of the Magicians, they understand these principles a little bit, slightly more than we do, but the crises that are happening in the series are basically helping them to wake up just a little bit more.
Mhm. I get that. And you're absolutely correct because of the fact that our society now is sort of waking up to, how important consciousness is to, all factors of life, not just, our psychological factors, but, how our consciousness is affecting our physical state, our emotional state, and how everybody is connected as well.
Yep.
That's a concept that I would say about 10, 15 years ago people really didn't really discuss as much as they do today.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now and now we're discovering everything, from your pet dog to your daughter to yourself. Everything is
Yeah.
connected and intertwined, and consciousness is experiencing itself, sort of,
Yeah.
I would say.
Exactly. Yep. And the interesting thing is when we become more aware of this, it comes with its own integrity. So that you
Yeah.
realize, okay, these things are these things. So you end up developing a sense of reverence and respect and courtesy to your immediate environment.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
100% true. And it also expands your thought process, and it kind of reawakens the imagination a little bit,
Oh yeah.
because now you're not only thinking, your perception is not only of self, it's of everyone, it's not of me, it's of we. So
Hmm.
when you're in that state of mind, it's like, okay, cool, how do my actions affect not only myself, but my immediate surroundings as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that, like, have and in the City of Magicians, right? Have you ever written a scene and realized your character refuses to do what you plan? Like, you're writing something you think is a cool idea, and then you read back on it, you're like, but hey, my MC won't do this, or like it's not in this character's personality to do that.
Right. Well, I love it when characters become alive, they talk to
Yeah,
you. And I've learned the lesson, you listen to them because their ideas are frequently better than your own. At one point, Sass has just heard some bad news, um, and he's going to go home and sulk. And that's a terrible thing to write. And it's an even worse thing for readers to slog through. So
yeah,
he comes in, and I'm just writing away, and then suddenly, um, a voice comes from above to him. It says, Sass, come up to my rooms. I need to talk with you. Have your meal in my rooms. And it says, Aunt. I always knew she was going to be a character, but suddenly
Yeah.
she inserted herself on the page. No argument. Okay, no, okay, yes, I'll pay attention. Yep, I'll put you down. Um, she made her insertion made the chapter much, much better. And this whole Sass going up to his room and just like blah 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 blah. Um, and the most important one where this happened, it was at the very end of the trilogy. I thought it was wrapping the whole thing up nicely. Um, the marriage goes off without a hitch. The baby is safely delivered. Everyone comes home from the wars. Everything is lovely. Um, it was sort of, it was, to be honest, it was a blah ending. And
Yeah.
um, and then my little writing voice said, "Okay, now that you've got this under your system, write this instead." And I was on fire. I incandescent. I wrote a 10-hour nonstop. I was just, I was laughing and I was crying. I was just beside myself with what was coming out. And it was an ending that basically opened up the fact that, oh my goodness, there are more books after this.
Yeah.
And so I showed it to Robert, my partner, and he said, "Oh my goodness, don't change a word." And I didn't. But the problem was after that, I realized I had to bring up the rest of the manuscript to the level of that chapter that had just landed in my lap. And that took an additional 5 years of revision. So,
Now I get that, but in moments like that, right, where you get this muse, this spark,
mhm.
download, this download
Yeah,
from the universe, right?
yeah, yeah,
Don't you think that sometimes that is intentional for you to kind of like you said, like that chapter, fire, amazing. And
yeah,
when you compared it to the rest of it, you were like, okay, cool. I have to level everything up in order to match that, right? Do you think
yeah.
that because of the fact that you were in the zone, you were in flow, that you tapped into, I don't want to say tapped into something beyond yourself, but you tapped
Oh, yeah.
into like the raw idea, the more depictive idea of what you were getting at?
Yep. But it was also very precise. The
Yeah.
writing was precise, and this happens here, and it was intricate. And I was dazzled by the. But you're right. The whole previous 13 years or whatever it was of writing books one, two, and three, it's as if this was all just for this enormous um, wow finish. And it was but you're right, it's almost as if I snuck up on myself over a 13-year period until I came,
Yeah.
wow, okay, this is what it's aiming for. um, but it's very interesting how it snuck up on me, because the initial ending I had was sort of, yeah, check the boxes and just like, oh God, what a terrible way to end this 13 years of effort. And and as a result, the book opened up. And the trilogy opened up and realized, okay, there are more books, which is what I'm working on now. I'm working on, as I speak, on books 4, 5, and 6, the second trilogy.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
And that's amazing. And that's amazing that that spark leveled everything up and caused
yeah.
a second trilogy to happen because that's
Hmm.
awesome.
Yep, yep.
So like, sorry about this.
Yeah, yeah.
Where was I? Why? Why do you think that we're fascinated by the collapses of civilizations?
Oh, because we're we're sort of in the middle of one now, in a way.
Yeah.
They say the U.S. is in decline. In certain aspects, it is, but at the same
Yes.
time, it is also immensely powerful. And um, but it's going through its reserves very, very quickly. But it's also, you see the arch enemy of Russia basically destroying itself. But what happens when it falls apart? People are already discussing what are the options for Russia. Does it revert into a does it go into civil war? Do the thugs reign supreme? Do the oligarchs basically pile in? Or does it become a sensible um, um, company of nations.
Yeah.
Who knows? So it is fascinating. We sit in our armchairs, very comfortable exploring these things, and meanwhile, bit by bit, it's coming closer. Um,
True.
and our systems are under enormous strain. And yet, the amazing thing, if you read those books down there, um,
Yeah.
that's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. All 8 volumes. Good old, what was his name? Gibbons, who wrote that. The ones immediately after, like the purple
Yeah.
ones, oh, I can't read them. It's called the, I'm not, let me get the title. This is an 8 volume. This was an answer, I think, to Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the
Yeah.
Roman Empire. These are called the barbarian invasions of the Roman Empire. And
Okay.
oh my goodness, they are so depressing. Battle after battle, death after death, machinations going wrong, machinations proving right, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. So, but if you take a look at the Roman history, it was going through terrible declines and yet um, after a really rather rigorous, terrible, near civil war period, suddenly they had I think it was called, it was the year of the four emperors, when emperor after emperor, they didn't survive this crisis. And then it was followed by this reign of 5 good emperors from the Marcus Aurelian.
Yeah.
Reforms got passed in. They were open to this, that, the other. They went through Renaissance, um,
Yeah.
and yet in the end, then they got invaded by these guys. This is the Visigoths, and then there's
The
the
Visigoths.
Ostrogoths, then there's the Huns, then there's the Franks and the Lombards. And just, oh my goodness, it was a big old mess. Anyway, so even though the world is going through this crisis, it can um, restore itself.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the themes in the second trilogy. That, oh yeah, the city has absolutely turned a corner. There is extraordinary rupture that no one has seen coming, except Sass, who has, because he's trained in some of the telepathic arts that the city still has, he's becoming more aware of what's going on here. There's something behind all these crises, and yet
Yeah.
there's a curious balance that's happening here. No one exactly wins, um, and but then behind this peculiar static of, yeah, there's all this infighting, and yet we're not progressing. So what's behind it? So Sass begins to figure out, oh my goodness, there is something much larger going on.
Okay.
So we have to do the same thing. There are some really interesting things going on in the world, and there could be a renaissance right around the corner, but we have to wake up.
Yeah, I was just about to ask for your opinion on that. Do you believe that even though the U.S. is steadily in decline right now, with all the division and all the the political upheaval that we're going through, and this person saying that this person is doing X, Y, and Z, and all the childishness that we see in our government, do you feel that the U.S. would eventually like come out and have a new age sort of renaissance after like all the muck is like kind of like cleaned out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And sometimes this is how and why
Yeah.
there is a renaissance. You have to have it go. You shouldn't have to have it. You should be very sensible to say, no, let's not allow this to happen. But if you realize that Congress had been giving powers to the president over a century, for over a century,
Yeah.
and just hasn't happened now. So the Constitution was written so that no, the separation of powers was done quite deliberately, and yet bit by bit, it chisels away. Um, so at some point, maybe there's going to be a constitutional party that comes up, neither Democrat, neither Republican, a constitutional party that says, let's get back to the basics that made us great and made us exceptional, that allows an exceptionalism, not just American, but of humanity. Um, so the U.S. is an amazing experiment, and it's ongoing. But that
Yeah.
goes back also to your other thing, that there is there are movements like the No Kings thing. Some of these people are very aware of that 3.5%, but make sure that the administration knows that well. But the interesting thing is, with all the ICE stuff that was happening, they have pulled back. And all that huge public outcry about their how they were doing it and everything else. Um, they have pulled back. It was really interesting. I went down last year to the LA Times Festival of Books. I was invited to sign books down there. Coming from Canada, there's real fear a year ago that, my goodness, who's going to get hauled off? Who's going to have their phone downloaded? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And they were there. They were there at the Canadian border in Canada. We have sort of a customs security that's there, and they were there. I had no problems getting through. But this year, when I came down to the LA Times Festival of Books, they weren't there at all. It was just basically very normal. How long are you staying for? When are you going down for? Have a nice trip. So So it's very interesting how they have reacted to the pushback. So the thing is, don't stop the pushback.
Yeah.
And so it's me. So there's a whole lot of the world that is with you guys, absolutely. And so
I
I
get.
think so. Go ahead.
No. I definitely see the difference, and and this is coming from a first generation immigrant. Like my parents are from the Dominican Republic, so
Okay.
you know, last year I had a similar event where ICE was in my neighborhood and they were rounding people
Right.
up, and they stopped my mom. You know what I
Wow.
mean? So
Yes.
she had all her identification. She's a U.S. citizen and whatnot, but
Yeah.
it's just what I what affects me, or at least affects majority of people, is that they're stopping people indiscriminately. You know what I mean? Like
Of course. Yeah.
I understand if ICE and that policing faction was going after criminals, going after people who are literally doing bad for the country. But when you're just stopping people randomly that because they look a certain way or they speak another
Yeah.
language or whatnot,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's shocking because it's like I could be on my way to work, and just because I look the way I look, I get stopped. And I was
Right.
born, right here in Manhattan. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, that was the curious thing as well. The first year I was there, and they had not really officially started rounding the undocumented. They weren't really going after the hardened criminals, but they were also
Yeah.
going after the undocumented people who are actually a tremendous economic force. It's
Yeah.
very quiet. It's under the table. It saves money for various factories. Um, I went off to a gallery, and it was in the garment district of LA. Like I don't know LA at all. Um, when the taxi was driving through, it was in the evening. It was like about 7 o'clock at night. I was told don't walk there, um, um, and these huge bags of industrial-sized garbage bags were in front of every doorway, and I just thought, my goodness, are you guys going through a garbage strike? I said, no, 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 you're in the garment district. This is all the leftover fabric from a single day of the factories. I said, really? And my heart just went, what are the landfill sites going through getting this? This is a daily thing. And he said, no, all of this will be cleared away by 6 o'clock in the morning to start all over again. But 2 weeks later, I was back in Canada. There was ICE, and they were rounding up people in that very neighborhood that I had been. And I didn't realize that they all worked in the garment district. Um, and I just, oh my goodness. And that's when it basically started.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
but the interesting thing is they are part of the economic engine. And what is
Yeah.
going to replace them? And how are these
Yeah.
businesses going to function? Um, their bottom line has been um, knocked out from under them. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I got that. How how much of the City of Magicians is actually about the world we're living in today?
I try to make sure it isn't. I try to deal with the universal aspects of
Yeah,
through history and the parallels that it has today. Um, yeah, but because I have this provisional sympathy for pacifism, um, pacifism, as we know, doesn't always quite work. Um, but it is, if it's strong enough, it may just. But timing and patience is everything. And if you're going to be angry at stuff, that's not an answer. Anger
yeah,
makes you do things that are not solution oriented. They
I
basically
got you.
add, you know, more grit to the struggle. Um, so yeah, but if you take a look at some historical examples, like um, where pacifism failed
Yeah,
or compromised the situation, was Prime Minister Chamberlain in England went to Nazi Germany in order to get a peace deal out of Hitler. And
yeah,
there's a famous film of him saying, "I have a piece of paper from Herr Hitler." This is in 1939.
yeah.
And he ended up getting booted out of, lost being prime minister because before you knew it, Hitler had invaded Poland and Great Britain had just declared war. And so part of it was in reaction to the First World War. People had had enough. There was war fatigue. Um, and they didn't want to have wars at all. Not even Germany. The population of Germany itself did not want war. If you take a look at
I'm
all
not.
the, yep, and but anyway, so but they got steamrollered into it by the Nazi Party and the nationalism that grew up because of the Treaty of Versailles, which was a disaster, and
Yeah,
it should, and anyway, so. There are parallels for sure, but
yeah,
I focus on the parallels without making exact linkages with what's
yeah.
happening.
I got you.
Um, yeah, it's safer that way.
Facts. It definitely is.
Yeah,
So let me ask you this: can good people remain good when evil refuses to play by the same rules?
absolutely. Yep. Um, That's what happens with my second protagonist, Lalia, who
Yeah,
she gets accidentally recruited into the underground movement that's plotting to collaborate with the same barbarian. But you
yeah,
don't really figure out why they're planning this. But they do it through drugs, through sexual coercion,
yeah,
orgies, blackmail, treachery, you name it. And she realizes, my goodness, it was fun to begin with, and then she realizes, my goodness, I can't do this. Except I have to, I have no choice. So she buries her integrity deep, deep down. And but she is still, okay, you're still there, thank goodness. Okay, yeah. So she still measures things against this, even though it's incredibly buried. Um, and but bit by bit, she um, gradually extricates herself almost invisibly from this underground movement that
yeah,
doesn't have the best intentions. Um, and, uh, and as a result of this, she becomes an absolute linchpin for the plot. And that and ends book one. If it wasn't for Lalia and her struggle to maintain her integrity,
yeah,
her her understanding about what she's involved with. And yet, if she tries to say, "No, I'm out of here," her death would be next. And then she
yeah,
knows it. So she knows she's struggling against keeping her integrity alive and facing death. So,
yeah.
but she manages it. Um,
That's what's up. That's dope.
yeah,
All right, Pete.
I found her
So
really interesting. So go ahead. Yeah,
no, no. This is actually a question that I thought deeply on, right?
yeah.
So, if you could have every world leader read one chapter of the trilogy, which chapter would it be and why?
Wow. Um, I would have. Hmm, that's a tricky question. It depends on each world leader. I think some world leaders would the interesting, just in chapter one, just, oh, okay, I have to think along this one. Some I would have them read the last chapter of book three, which basically comes out of nowhere because the whole trilogy builds to that. Um, um, hmm, it would depend on each world leader, I think. Um, uh,
Okay.
but I think perhaps the very last chapter, as a general sort of thing, it
Yeah.
wrecks the whole trilogy if you read that final chapter
Okay.
last or first,
Okay.
because you
Okay.
know where it's going. But that's the other thing. As a writer, I write best to endings, whether it's a chapter or even a paragraph or a book itself. Um, if I know the ending, then I can go all over the place until suddenly, boom, there I am. Um, that was not quite the same thing that happened in the third book. I thought I had an ending, and I slowly got towards that until boom. But that's an interesting question. I would tell
Hmm.
them to um, take a month off from read the entire entire series. Right.
But all right. So our closing question. Well, right before our closing question, imagine somebody finishes book three, right? Closes the cover, sits in silence for a minute. What's the one thought, or you hope? What's that one thought you hope that stays with them?
um, I've had a couple of people who have um, read that and just said, "Oh my God, what happens next?" So to those people, I have actually sent them and given them a copy of chapter one of book four. They just say, "Oh my God."
Ooh.
Yeah, so so yeah, so then they just said, "Okay, tell me what else." Um, um, they should think of who you vote for, how, and if you have your own battles, um, bring patience along with your inner algorithm, if that's what you want to use the word for,
Yeah.
um, and test your life against. Am I doing the right thing? Your own inner sense will tell you. But sometimes you just say, no, 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 I want to do this, I want to do this. And so if you're noticing this push me pull you type thing inside, you're not paying attention to your larger sense of self. And so if you're reading that last chapter and what are you going to come away with? Um, you basically want. I don't really want to go through this, but I'm hooked. So
No, but it's amazing. All right, Petey. So the question I ask all my guests is, do you have any advice, final thoughts, or words of wisdom for the roomies?
yeah, if you're writing your own book, um, one of my basic premises, and it's the thing that motivated me. Everyone's going to be different, so write for your own reasons. But one of the things that may motivate your writing is what bugs you, and say,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I've never actually played with this by writing about it. Like I have never thought I would ever write about my experience in the Normandy war memorial sites. But that whole notion of pacifism sat with me for decades. In the end, that was one of the um, premises of City of the Magicians. And it took me in places that I never thought I'd go. But with that thing that sat with me unresolved um, for decades was a really motivating thing. So write about what bugs you. Um, my own habits will be different from everyone else's. If you want to write a trilogy of that size or a book of that size, I'll tell you something else about the book. I only thought it was going to be one book. Um, and my publisher said, "Oh my goodness, this is getting so enormous. Can you not sort of divide it up or shorten it or something?" And so I examined what I've been writing and I thought, oh my goodness. And it went through what I like to call a literary mitosis, a cellular division of one, two, and three. And I thought, oh my goodness, how smart is something that has been watching out for me to say, wow,
Yeah.
isn't that amazing? Um, so be alert to those things as well. But one of my habits was that I wrote every day for that 13-year period,
Yeah.
anywhere from 5 to 8 hours every day without fail. The only exceptions were when my partner Robert had to go to the hospital or go for a doctor's appointment, that sort of stuff. But it was a
Yeah.
very solid, um, and you start small. Don't write 3 to 5 hours every day to begin with. Start small, making sure that, um, in the same way that you get up, you have your coffee, you shave, or you put your makeup on, send the kids off to school, whatever it might be,
Yeah.
get dressed. Writing must also be as essential as that. You make it into a habit, start small, and bit by bit, even if it's 15 minutes, and just, okay, this is my writing period. I'm clear the decks for the next half hour, and then bit by bit, cumulatively, you realize, oh my goodness, look in the last year, I've written the equivalent of at least one book. Um,
I
and
got you.
so, yeah, so in the end, when the writing grabs you and becomes such an integral part of your daily existence, yeah, you can write 5 to 8 hours a day, every day for 13 years.
I
But
got
start small.
I got you, Peter. Well, roomies, let your experiences fuel your desires and your inspiration. And with that, peace out.